This morning I had the great honor to say goodbye to Rinpoche, offer a kata. And so Rinpoche asked me what I will teach. So I told him about dependent arising. So Rinpoche said, dependent arising and compassion. And he said, oh, dependent arising, such an important topic. So Lama Tsongkhapa, as you're probably aware of, did a whole praise on the Buddha because of him teaching dependent arising, right? So I thought to just share this with you, Rinpoche's words. But I also thought to start off with something again that I noticed, not just in Singapore, but in all developed countries. We come from a society of high-speed trains, fast food, and instant coffee. Right? High-speed internet, of course, not to forget, and so forth. So we are very used to instant results. And then we come across the Buddha Dharma, and it's anything but instant. Maybe we feel we become worse because we look at our own mind and go, whoa, I didn't know that. We identify our own anger, maybe before we weren't aware of it. But what I think is really important, there's a saying, it's actually, I think it's French. There's a French proverb. I'm just going to change it a little bit. The proverb is, Rome was not built in a day. I'll change Rome for Singapore. Singapore was not built in a day. Right? And then there's a great writer, his name is John Haywood. He added this phrase, but they were laying bricks every day. So Singapore was not built in a day, but they were laying bricks every day. Now a brick is not something significant. It's tiny. Come on, I can lay a brick. Put it somewhere. Of course, this is not what this means, but there were little tiny steps, with each step seeming quite insignificant. And look what's the result, this huge, big city. So much greenery, beautiful building, good quality. It didn't happen in a day. So Dharma practice is similar. So I thought this is a nice saying. Singapore is not built in a day, but they were laying bricks every day. So our Dharma practice is like that. Any important action needs a lot of time. And small little actions make changes. And yesterday, when we talked about you living in the real world, I mean, of course, and I said that, of course, we also live as monks and nuns in the samsaric world. That is, we carry around our own samsara as opposed to nirvana. And so therefore, the changes happen from within and they're slow. And so you cannot check on a daily basis. That would be like, is Singapore bigger today? Right? Are there new buildings up overnight? Of course not. Maybe a few walls, a few more bricks that were laid. But if you look in the long term, look back at your own mind, when you started, as opposed to now, what a difference. And actually, Ayadeva, his great Indian master, who was the direct disciple of the great Indian Nagarjuna. Okay? So very important Buddhist figure after the Buddha. He said that those of little merit would not even have doubt about ideas such as, let's say, emptiness, or he says actually emptiness, the idea of the ultimate nature of phenomena. But those who have only doubt, they shatter cyclic existence. So just doubting that the self doesn't exist the way it appears, just doubting that things don't exist the way it appears, it shatters your whole foundation. Just doubt. So the person I'm sometimes thinking, those who found the Dharma versus those who have no idea, no interest. Do I want to change with them? No way. No way. Even at the very beginning, when I just started off, the difference already when you started off the Dharma between you moving in that direction versus those no interest. Only interest in making more money, gaining more power, gaining more riches. Oh my God, who wants to change with them? Because in the end, their lives are pretty empty. They're looking for the same happiness we are looking for, but they're looking and they find a little satisfaction, and then they keep having to jump to the next and jump to the next, and there's so much suffering. So really, just the fact we found the Dharma in that we can apply certain techniques that may help us to be a little kinder with ourselves and others, that's huge. That's huge. And of course it's up to us how much we put into practice, and it's little steps at a time. And maybe you did your homework. Remember, for those of you who are not here, I ask you to apply the first level of dependent arising, causes and conditions, and I'll say more about this today, to apply this to a person who you have a hard time with, who you have resentment towards, and just try to see if you just imagine you don't know the exact causes and conditions that made that person difficult or, I don't know, aggressive. But we can all imagine what gave rise to that and see whether we can actually sincerely generate the wish for them to be happy. Okay? So I'll give you another homework. So let's see later on, but I'll say a little bit more about this once again. Okay. So basically, I also want to give you a quote by His Holiness. It's always inspiring to have a quote by His Holiness about dependent arising. So His Holiness says that the world is becoming smaller now to the degree that all the parts of the world are obviously part of ourselves. Therefore, destruction of our enemy is destruction of ourselves. Okay? So this describes dependent origination or dependent arising or dependent existence, whichever word you want to use, also from the point of view of karma. Because everything is connected. What you give out, what goes around, comes around. There's the English saying. There's another one. It comes back to bite you in the butt. That's karma, right? You give something out, it comes back to bite you in the behind. So it's a bit like, Holiness puts it so beautifully, we're all part of one big organism. Everyone is part of us to a degree. In the same way that every part of my body is an organism. My body is an organism, a particular organism that's connected. It's a smaller type of organism, but nonetheless it is an organism. The human world is a bigger organism, with everything being connected. Now, if you, taking the small organism, your body, you insert some poison in your right leg, because of the disconnectedness, it will actually, the hand that inflicted the poison will actually come back to that hand because of the connectedness. So similar, karma is like that. Environmental issues are like that. Put some poison in a particular river, and because of the connectedness, it goes into the ocean, etc. So eventually it comes back to the person sooner or later to bite them in the, you know what. So basically karma is just like that. So we give something out, and sooner or later, it may take a while, it comes back to us. So there you have dependent arising. You create a cause, a condition, you have a result. That describes the first level of dependent arising. Okay, causes and conditions. Yesterday I was asked about some literature on dependent arising. Now, the answer that was given was the Rice Seedling Sutra. Yes, absolutely. But actually the Rice Seedling Sutra deals with the first level of dependent arising, dependence on causes and conditions, plus on a very particular kind of causes and conditions. So ignorance is the main cause that gives rise to, compositional action, consciousness, name and form, etc. The Four Noble Truths are another type of dependence on causes and conditions. You have the cause of afflictions, gives rise to suffering. You have the cause, which is the path, then it leads to the cessation. So again, you have dependence, like a cause gives rise to an effect. So this is with regard to dependence on causes and conditions. It describes a cause and effect relationship. Okay? It's very extensive. All right. But there are other levels of dependent arising that are even more difficult. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama usually says, he says, dependent arising is accepted by many different philosophical systems, spiritual systems, but they don't go far enough. It's incomplete. So to take Christianity, for instance, so of course, as Buddhist, His Holiness in particular has great respect for the great religion of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, monotheistic religions. His Holiness has great faith in their, great respect for these religious systems, for the benefit that they provide to sentient beings. However, from a mere philosophical point of view, cause and effect are not described to the fullest extent. It falls short. Because if God is responsible for suffering and happiness, and here, of course, there's disagreement on how much God is responsible for. Some would say God is responsible for all happiness and suffering, and some would say no, only certain sufferings and happiness. But from a Buddhist point of view, you need a particular cause that gives rise to a particular result. So if God is described as a living being that hands out suffering and happiness, that's difficult from the point of view of dependent arising from the point of view of causes and conditions. That's difficult because it's not accepted to be that God gives suffering and happiness. It's our own mind that creates suffering and happiness for ourselves. And then there are other philosophical systems that existed in India where they said, a sprout, the cause of a sprout is the seed. They don't even talk of God, maybe. But they say a round pea, the roundness of a pea doesn't have a cause. It's too perfect. Can't have a cause. Or the colors of a matcha. What is this beautiful bird? Peacock. The different colors of a peacock feathers, those detailed, beautiful colors, they're causeless. So they had that assertion. And then even within the Buddhist system, the Buddha himself set forth different levels. He gave different levels of explanation with regard to reality. Why? And for those of you who were not here yesterday, just to mention it, why is that important? Because all our negative emotions arise as a result of not perceiving phenomena for not perceiving phenomena correctly. So because we don't perceive them correctly, because we exaggerate their existence, exaggerated emotions arise. Which is why Buddhism is so concerned about setting it right. How do phenomena really exist? And so initially the Buddha taught dependent arising dependent existence to the philosophers who were ready for this type of philosophy just on the basis of causes and conditions. You have a result, then it must have certain causes and conditions that gave rise to it. Otherwise, you can't have a result. Okay? It's not causeless. It's not like it just was there one day. No, everything has its causes and conditions. And those are changing all the time. They're changing. And they must have the potential to create that result. Okay. So this is what the Buddha taught basically. But then there are two more levels of dependent arising. So this is just the first one, dependent existence, if you want, or dependent arising from the point of view of causes and conditions. So dependence on main causes, secondary conditions. Okay. So the philosophers, the basic philosophies in Buddhism, philosophical system, they understood that. But then for some, introducing even deeper types of dependent arising or dependent existence was too much initially. So temporarily the Buddha left it at that. But for some philosophical schools, he also taught dependence on parts. And then he taught the deepest level, dependence on labeling. For the highest philosophical systems in Buddhism, and highest only because they're the hardest to understand, but need to be understood eventually. So the other philosophical system the Buddha set forth, he only taught them temporarily to prepare the minds of disciples. It's like Singapore school system. First grade, right? You don't learn everything about science. You get a basic kind of understanding. It may not totally be exactly in accordance with reality, but it helps the student to make the mind more flexible, to later on then learn about the higher systems. Same idea. So it was not to deceive the students, first graders are all being tricked here. No. Just gently preparing their mind, making it more flexible to then go further. Just as we do with exercising, we start gently. A few movements, a few stretches. So likewise in school. So the Buddha had that same pedagogical system. Start slowly until they were ready to take more. So school is a good example. And then eventually you get the whole picture. Okay? But nowadays in the West, we give people the whole picture because maybe you've been around all this time, you received all the classes in your previous lives and now you're ready for Prasangika. Or, of course, definitely you have some imprint, some background, because otherwise you have the interest in the first place and probably understand much easier than other people who have no interest in Buddhism. And also, of course, you have a background in modern education, which is very helpful for introducing those ideas. Okay, so causes and conditions. But actually, today, I want to talk of dependent origination with relation to the I. I. Right? Have you ever counted how often in a day we say I? And if we don't say it that often, how often we think I? That could be a new homework. Like a mala. I. Whoop. I, whoop, or mine, or me, right? Okay, that's actually fascinating. Now, imagine you're the slave to someone. From morning to evening, someone tells you, get this, do this. I need cappuccino, I need breakfast, I need to now take a walk, I need to now bath, I need to be hot, I need to be cold, I need to be hot again. Actually, we are slaves to this mind. I need this, I want that. We wake up in the morning, I need, I want. Even in our dreams, right? if we had to do what we do for the I for another person, I think without payment, I don't think we would last longer than 2 weeks. Right? Think about it. There's constantly this thought, I. And then the legs start moving, all the other thoughts are, right? I. It's amazing. We're such slaves to our I. Now that I better be there. I mean, what is that I? Have we ever wondered? We don't remember past lives. Maybe some of you do. But let's just focus on this lifetime. Since we were very little, I. It's been about I. And when did we ever wonder, what is that I? I mean, I left Germany to find myself. That was one of those things, you did after high school, right? Just before you start university, go and find yourself. Well, lucky I was to meet Buddhism. To figure there's nothing to find. But that's a different story. Anyway, so the I, that is this big thing. I mean, come on, let's really, so many times in the day, I, right? Okay. So a lot in Buddhism is about that particular I. Now, please don't get me wrong. No one is saying the I doesn't exist. Now, this is a little misleading since we use the word selflessness. But it doesn't literally mean that I don't exist. It doesn't mean that. It's in Tibetan, in Sanskrit, in the languages that were traditionally used, well, in India, in Tibet, it's the same word. Nameba, anatma. So words that deny the self. But they actually are just saying the self doesn't exist. Why? Because the self that we perceive, that controls, that runs the show, that runs our life, that particular one doesn't exist. But there's one that does exist. For us, it's just so hard to identify that. I was trying to think of different examples when we talk about how the self really exists. It's a bit like we wear sunglasses with reddish tinted glasses, with red tinted. Everything appears red. And someone tells us, well, actually it's white. And we're like, what? Yeah, it's white. Of course it's white. But we keep seeing red. So when someone tells us the self doesn't really exist, our only notion of a self is one that is inherently, truly here, somewhere here to be found. And so initially, it's very hard to recognize what they're talking about. Very difficult. Because we perceive the opposite. In fact, you'll come to see also with respect to dependent arising, sometimes we perceive the opposite. Emotionally, we perceive the opposite. Rationally, and this is another tricky part of our own psyche, there are different levels of rational mind. I talked about it yesterday a little bit, how our negative emotions arise. Remember, I said we never get angry without a reason. We start thinking, he did so-and-so, she said such and such, I was really good to them, but this is how they repay me, and then after a few seconds, anger. It doesn't arise spontaneously after we hear the insult, for instance. It takes a while. So we do think. We use rational thinking, but it's not in accordance with reality. It's an exaggerated response, which leads to exaggerated emotion. Now, with regard to this exaggeration, we do this all the time with regard to exaggeration. We always add something. But we have different level of rational minds. We have a coarser and a subtler. And often they clash. Often the coarser mind is in accordance with reality, but the subtler one isn't. So one example, I know I'll die. Rational mind. I know life is uncertain. Deep rational mind. I'm too busy to die tomorrow. My schedule is full. I don't have time to die tomorrow, so I'm not going to die tomorrow. Isn't that right? So rationally, we know there's this coarse intellectual understanding. Okay, I'm just making this movement, right? I don't know. It's just kind of like deeper within the emotional psyche. I don't know how to put it. But there's this coarser type of intellectual mind. Yeah, I know I can die any time. But deep within, not tomorrow. I'm going to live forever somehow. I'm planning ahead as if I was. Right? I have a lot of plans for the future because anything is possible, just not death. So you see, there is that already. So not only do we not perceive reality for what it is, but there's also this discrepancy between our understanding, kind of coarse understanding, and subtler kind of sense of reality. Another example is, we know beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. How weird this person thinks that's beautiful. Right? We have a sense, those people are weird. They like this kind of music. They like this kind of fashion. How weird they are. Glad I'm normal. I'm glad I'm normal. I'm kind of normal. I do it right. And they're just wrong. How sad. Right? So if you actually look into your own mind, you find there is this, oh yeah, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. It's all a matter of taste. But deep within, it's like, I'm right and they're wrong. Sorry. I got a good taste and they're really a little bit off. Isn't that right? So there's this discrepancy. And actually, what governs our actions? That one comes from deep within. Deep within. So this is why in Buddhism, what we do is we try to set things slightly right. Not like totally get rid of, it's not like bananas become apples and pears become grapes. It's not about that. But just say, we're okay, those are bananas and those are tables and those are, the Buddha himself says, I am not contradicting the world. I'm not contradicting the world. So things are still, but this additional characteristic that we give to phenomena, that I'm taking away. And this is initially just intellectually. Okay? So then people say, I studied so much, but my mind hasn't changed. Well, because it's up here and our actions are governed by a more emotion, like a deeper kind of understanding. That's why we meditate. We bring it to that level. We try to internalize it. So mere intellectual understanding will not change our actions. So therefore, with the death meditation, some of you are probably familiar with the death meditation. Initially, people fear it, and then they love it because it's effective. You start off, yeah, I can die anytime, but we make plans. We don't. But then when you start meditating, you bring that rough understanding onto a more emotional level. So this is what we need to look out for. When we are mindful, when we practice mindfulness, to recognize how we misperceive the I and so forth, that's what we need to look out for that deeper mind, and watch it. Now again, we are very good at bringing all our samsaric thought into the Buddhist practice. I'm so bad. Before it was my neighbor, and now it's me. We bring the whole thing. Oh, I'm such a bad practitioner. So whereas first I was angry with my neighbor, now I get angry with myself. Thank you very much. Buddhism helped me from getting the focus of my anger, taking it from the neighbor to myself. If we don't have already self-loathing, because that's already part of the 21st century. So we need to be very skillful with this. This is why I think Tibetans are very good candidates for Dharma. They are notoriously laid back. It's very difficult to stress them out. Today, Chengji and I, we were in the car, and so we're just saying, wow, Rinpoche is so relaxed. Very difficult to imagine him being stressed out. Very difficult. I tried to imagine him trying to catch a bus. He's so laid back, right? So calm. And so they also have a great sense of humor. But this was the nice surprise, because I found Singaporeans have a great sense of humor. How they tease each other. And that's a great quality. Because then you go, hoo-hoo, my own mind. Isn't that funny? Oh, I don't need any cartoons or funny movies. I just need to watch my own thoughts. Actually quite funny what's going on. The self-grasping mind, trying to cheat. Oh, I give generously. Oh, I hope everyone knows I gave. I hope my name is outside on the board, right? So the self-grasping just creeps in. I mean, it's just we can't help it. So even in our Dharma practice, and I get upset if I'm not doing well. Oh, how interesting. Look at the self-grasping mind. Making me angry with myself because I have to be a better Dharma practitioner. And if I'm not, I don't like myself. Right? It's always creeping in. Yeah. I feel guilty. Guilt. I don't know whether in Singapore guilt is an issue. Oh, it is. Okay. I tell you, in the West, woo, the Bible, of course, Catholic Bible. So we have our proportion of guilt. It comes from that, of course, too, is the culture. But it's also like a guilt culture, right? So it's like you feel guilty for this, that. That's just an exaggerated response. I mean, what I've done, I've done. Past is past. I can't undo it. So I'm sorry. Pick myself up and keep trying. There's actually a song. I like that song. Pick myself up and try. Keep trying, right? Pick myself up and keep trying. Pick myself up and keep trying. She keeps saying that in that song. Dharma practice is like that. You don't know the song? I don't know. It's just a song. It's just I heard it when I was in Germany. My sister kept listening to it. Just Google it maybe. Pick myself up and keep trying. It's not even a song I would like, but I like the words. So it's like, all right, made a mistake. You start again. You try again. All right? So see it with humor. Look at your own mind. Oh, and you learn to make fun of yourself. You learn to make fun of yourself. And because I noticed this with Singaporeans, I thought, great. Very important. I'm not so sure about laid back. You seem very laid back, but everyone is saying they're not. So I'm not sure. Most people I'd met seem very laid back and jolly and, very open and friendly. But you know yourself better, so I don't know about the laid back. But in the end, it's a good quality. Not to bring everything, oh, now I'm a Dharma practitioner. And you stress yourself out. And then before long, you don't want to continue because you're so stressed out over the Dharma practice. Okay. Anyway, but going back to the self and the different types of dependent origination or dependent arising. So there is a sense, pretty strong. Difficult to identify. It's kind of like it's there, and then when you check, it's not there. Yeah, but it feels strong. So there are times when we get insulted, for instance. Oh, it's very strong. Wow, it's like Or if you're embarrassed in front of lots of people, someone says, you are the one who stole, what have you. Okay? Imagine the worst thing, a statue is missing, and they accuse you of stealing it and selling it. In front of, wow, that's a great opportunity. We should create those opportunities for the self-grasping. I'm just joking. But it's like this sense of, wow, me, it's like the worst, and never would I even dream of this. How could they misunderstand? So this is a great opportunity, actually, however painful, to watch the I. Okay? But it is, of course, very difficult to become aware of it. And so to understand the self better, first of all, there is this technique of looking for the I. It's described in the text by Nagarjuna called the Mula Madhyamika Karika, but I don't feel today you're ready for it, so I want to do this at another time. But you start looking for the I. Where is it? Is it part of the body? Is it in the body? Can I find it within this cycle, within this physical body, first of all? Because there's a sense, at times it's in my heart or in my head, in my belly. Usually those are the parts where if there's a strong sense of I, that's where I look for it. And then other parts of the body, I look for it. Where could it be? Okay. And then I also look for it in the mind. Rinpoche did that analysis at some point. Which of those different consciousnesses is it? They come and go. We have different sense awarenesses. We see colors and shapes. We hear sounds. We smell things. We taste something. We feel heat and cold. So those are the sense consciousnesses. And then we have the mental consciousness, the one that's chattering all the time. And there are different types. Sometimes there's love, sometimes there's anger, but they're different. And they're not there all the time. The I seems to be there the whole time. And it's very interesting. There's a sense there's always an I to such a degree that there's a feeling the I that came into the TBC about an hour ago is the same I that's sitting there right now. It feels like that. Intellectually, we may think, no, I've changed. If you're long enough a Buddhist, you think, oh, no, I've changed. But if you really go deep within, isn't there a sense that's the same I? The I that drove here, that came here, and that I, there's a sense they're the same. If they're the same, if an hour ago, so the self from an hour ago and the self now, if they are one, it means the self has not changed. It means we perceive a permanent self. So it seems very solid and permanent. Therefore, where is that permanent self? The mind keeps changing, the body keeps changing, but that not changing self cannot be found. It may be scary initially, but then it may be like, thanks Buddha. Not thanks God, thanks Buddha. Wow, kind of a release. Don't have to worry about that permanent I so much, because we worry so much about it. My reputation, my insurance, my old age pension, my car, my house, my neighbor, so little less to worry about, right? So the permanent I, there's a sense of a permanent, there's something unchanging. That's impossible. How could mind and body change, but something keep constant? And we have lots of optical illusions, so big deal. It appears to exist in a way in which it cannot exist. Right? For how long have you been saying the sun rises? Does the sun rise? No. The sun stands still. The earth moves. Oh, what a nice earth move this morning. Oh, look at how the earth moves, and now you can no longer see the sun at the beach. We kind of say sunset, sunrise. We use those words, we keep using them. But in actuality, we know the sun is neither setting nor rising. It just seems that way. It appears that way. Right? Yeah? And so there's a very famous Western philosopher. I think it's Wittgenstein? Not sure. It was him? Who said it? I think it was Wittgenstein. When someone said to Wittgenstein, I'm not surprised that people think that the sun revolves around the earth. So he said, why? This person said, because it looks that way. And so Wittgenstein said, well, what would it look like if it was different? What would it look like if it was the way? I mean, how could it look differently? So we assume one thing because that's how it appears, right? So with regard to the I, okay, Just because it appears that way doesn't make it true. Even if it exists differently, it would still appear that way. So what's the big deal? That doesn't make it true. Okay? So therefore, it's important to understand that such a self cannot exist, such a permanent I cannot exist. And if we understand that with regard to another person, it is very difficult to hold a grudge. Right? If I hold a grudge, why do I hold a grudge? Think you're in a situation where yesterday or last week, I don't know, someone, Joe, insulted me. And today I see Joe and I go, that's the guy who insulted me. I don't like that guy. That last week's Joe insulted me, but today's Joe is a different person. Joe has changed. So if I hold a grudge, I'm still angry with Joe. That shows I perceive Joe to be permanent because I perceive last week's Joe and today's Joe as the same person. So if they're the same person, then Joe hasn't changed. Does that make sense? So therefore, only understanding that a person changes makes it harder to hold a grudge. It makes it harder. It's not the same person. Now, knowing it intellectually may not enable us to let go of a grudge. But if you really meditate on this and you allow it to sink deeper, you're really in tune with the fact that everything and everyone is changing. Very difficult now to be angry with Joe. In fact, it becomes difficult. Does that make sense? So the understanding, the fact that Joe depends on causes and conditions means that he's changing. Because each cause gives rise to a result, and that in turn gives rise to another result. So in other words, there are these continuums of thoughts, one thought giving rise to the next, giving rise to the next, right? If you start watching your mind, it's like a train. Similar thoughts, yes, but the same thoughts, no, it keeps changing. And if you just take your body, thanks to modern science, I don't know, I remember when I went to school, we had to make these drawings of cells in the body. That was biology class. Cells in the body and the cell membrane and you call it a nucleus, the cell nucleus, right? And what's happening inside. Oh, so busy. Even when we're sleeping. Constant movement in the body. The blood is moving, the cells are moving. And of course, on a molecular level or atomic level, always changing. Always changing. So the body on a molecular level, on an atomic level, is constantly changing on a cellular level. And just on a course level, we just don't perceive it. We just don't perceive it because we hold on to permanence. Our mind is therefore influenced by it. And even though the change is right there, we cannot perceive it. It's because of our sense of reality. I mean, taking it to the level of the atoms around us, they're constantly changing. But neither are we aware of the atoms nor of the change. Therefore, to us, things are permanent. To us, it's a bit like our sense of aging is like every 5 years we age, right? A little bit. Actually, change can only be, there's only two possibilities. I mean, we know that we change, our body changes. Either it changes all the time or in intervals, right? So like every 5 years, whoops, 5 wrinkles more, or what have you, right? Be terrible if it was like that. Oh no, one of those days, right? So on top of the bad hair day, now we have it's one of those wrinkle days. Have 5 more. No, I mean, it's constantly changing. The fact we age, the fact that there's an obvious type of change is only possible because there's the subtle change. So, therefore, when we talk about dependent arising, we talk about the first level, dependence on causes and conditions, and that means that there's constant change, that a cause gives rise to a result, then that result is the cause of a next moment, and then that moment is the cause of the next moment, and so there is like a river. Every phenomenon around us, all the things around us, the things we see, our body, our mind, one moment gives rise to that. It's always changing. So where is that permanent I? Where is that I that is permanent? So that really helps us with, first of all, holding a grudge. What to hold a grudge at. Also attachment. What person is there we can hold on to? Nothing to hold on to. Okay? Seems to be so solidly there, this person, but there's nothing to hold on to. It's an ever-changing body and mind. So attachment becomes much harder. Anger becomes much harder. You can try, but it becomes harder. Jealousy becomes harder. Who to be jealous of? But then also going into the fact that everything is the result of causes and conditions. Look at your own life, you yourself. So to understand the self better, we look at the first type of dependence. We are dependent on causes and conditions. Main causes and secondary conditions, right? So first of our karmic actions in the past. That is one cause. Then our habits, past habits. That's also a cause. Then our parents' DNA. That's a cause. Our parents' habits. Right? Have you ever noticed, like there's this saying, I've become like my mom. I do the same as my mom. Of course, because our mom, our dad's behavior, those are also the causes and conditions. And then our teachers and so many causes and conditions that gave rise to who we are today. So how does arrogance come in there? How can we be arrogant? Oh, I'm so proud of my achievement. And so therefore I'm proud of my teachers, of the people who fed my teachers, of my parents, the people who fed my teachers. Because actually arrogance, if you understand that we are the result of causes and conditions, how can arrogance come in? Taking one quality and feeling like, oh, this is me. I have achieved this. Of course I've achieved this, but not on my own. Without all these other causes and conditions, other people. Yeah. So give the example. If you're an excellent writer or you're an excellent business person, we were not born kind of popping out of our mom's womb and going, well, let's do some business. Right? I mean, we were born as totally helpless little babies, and then we had to be taught by our parents. We had to be taught by society. We had to be fed. We had to be, amazing the process. How many causes and conditions had to come together to make us a good business person. And then we feel like it's my merit, it's my hard work. So actually, arrogance or this kind of deluded pride is a type of mind that takes just one aspect and feels this is causeless, it was only me who created it. So with an understanding of causes and conditions, I should be proud of everyone involved, not just of myself. So again, quite hard to be proud and arrogant with an understanding of causes and conditions. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you see, just that little understanding, hard to hold a grudge, hard to be attached, hard to be arrogant. Okay. But then, of course, we're exaggerating. And we sometimes pick one cause. Now, I don't know whether that's an issue in Singapore. This is a huge problem in the West. It's a new problem of taking dependent arising, yes, pick one aspect and exaggerating it. I'm usually saying exaggerating Freud's ideas. Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst, right? Who maybe for the first time, or at least that we know of, talked about our problems come from our parents. Okay? So yeah, certain stuff comes from our parents, but in the West, it has led to this exaggeration of my problems come from my mom and my dad. So my mom and my dad messed me up. Conclusion, I don't like my parents, they really messed me up. I mean, sometimes people really say the person I have the biggest problem is my mom and my dad. It's amazing. It's such a huge problem. It's why so many elderly people, old people in the West, they're left on their own now because their children like, she messed me up. She can stay on her own. I'm messed up. But you know, we don't even need to go into kindness. The fact your mom was around. Because I have cousins who grew up without their mothers and they still suffer. They're in their 40s, 50s. They still have a huge problem because their mom just wasn't around. They had no mom around to care for them. Yeah? So the fact our mom was around or someone was there and took care of us, that's just that. And then all the kindness our parents have given us. Is this a problem in Singapore? Not really. Not as bad in the West. Okay, good. Good. Okay, that's good to hear. So then don't need to go into that. But in the West, I usually talk about this difficult relationship we have with our parents, not understanding the incredible kindness of our parents. And again, picking a problem we have, but my good qualities are mine. The good qualities I'm responsible for. The messy parts are my parents. Are you kidding me? It's good and bad, it's everything. And in the end, it's like the karmic actions I created in the past. That is the main cause, of course. Not our parents. But so in that way, a full understanding of dependent arising can help us to really appreciate the kindness of the people around us. To not just see negative aspects, but to have a full picture. To have a full picture. So in that sense, dependent arising, dependence on causes and conditions, we have to understand that everything has many, many, many causes. There's never a single result that doesn't come from many causes and conditions. And there's never just one result. There are always many results. So part of the study that we do is first we just learn about this, how causes and conditions work. It's not easy, but a good understanding of that, of course, is essential for understanding karma. My actions have consequences. Every thought I think doesn't get lost. Every word I speak, okay, everything I do with my body, it has a consequence. So first, initially, we spoke about what goes around, comes around, the connectedness of this world. But also that each result basically comes from a cause, and my experiences are the result of past actions. That is extremely important. And so this understanding this better, just that, understands how we're all the results of different causes and conditions, and we're all connected, serving as each other's causes and conditions. And that takes me back to compassion. Because remember, the talk is about not just dependent arising, but how all this helps us to be more compassionate, to be more kind. Now, I already mentioned that being in tune with dependent arising helps us to work with like holding a grudge, to not hold a grudge, to be less angry, to be less possibly jealous, etc. Why? Because that is in the way to being really compassionate, be truly compassionate. Because that's the emotional side there. So if we're less angry with others, we don't hold a grudge, and we see that people are just like us, dependent on causes and conditions, where often we create conditions for ourselves, not knowing they're the causes for suffering. In fact, I believe no one deserves to suffer. Karma doesn't mean someone deserves to suffer. Right? Usually I give the example, You know, when you're in like Calcutta, for instance, where the water is not very clean. If you unknowingly drink from a water tap, or another person drinks from a water tap and they get violently sick, would you say they deserve that? No, it's out of not knowing that they drank that water, not knowing the kind of suffering it creates for them. So instead we have compassion. We don't say they deserve it. So likewise, when there are people around us who experience suffering or who experience also anger and selfishness, that is out of the misperception. That's like drinking from the wrong tap. Believing this brings them happiness, but in the long term, it brings them so much suffering. So how can we not be compassionate with a selfish, horrible person? Because they're really right there drinking from that. They're drinking that poison. Right? It's like the Buddha said. Anger is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. Right? So really, like these people, they get angry, they think they don't harm anyone, they harm themselves. We are only harmed if we become angry in turn. It's up to us. If we don't become angry, they don't harm us. If we stay patient and compassionate, first of all, their anger is more likely to get down. If we stay calm and collected, it's more difficult. If we go like, then their anger is probably, right? I mean, it's like, oh, maybe they're a little bit scared in the moment, but they're not going to love you for that. Versus if you find a way of staying calm, but not like calm as in like, you know, like the self-grasping can be a little bit tricky. Calm means like, I'm so calm. Right? There's this tricky, like it's not really calm. It's like, I want to really bother you calm. I'm so calm. You know what I mean? So it's not really. It's like, I'm talking about sincere and honest calmness. Just stay, you know, and sincere, like care for that person, but with wisdom, of course, again, right? And then even if they still continue to be angry, in the end, having compassion for them, that's the actual reaction, the only reaction, really, because they create so much suffering for themselves. So therefore, just that level, therefore, compassion is really possible if you understand causes and conditions. But living in the 21st century, it's always good to hear that compassion is actually very healthy on top of it. So maybe just add that as a little footnote. Because I'm trying to go back and forth between dependent arising, how it makes sense to be more kind and compassionate, and then to hear, well, by the way, it's really healthy. So if you like to eat organic food, add compassion to your menu, please. Right? I mean, this is always very beautiful in the Dharma group, that most people who learn about the Dharma are also conscious about the food, the organic food and so forth. And so it's very easy, you know, they oftentimes are interested in doing yoga, like doing exercising is good for the body, so healthy body, healthy mind. But here's like healthy mind, healthy body. It goes both ways. Because science has found that certain negative, harmful chemicals are released in the case of anger, which is like the opposite can become the opposite of compassion. Instead of wishing someone to be free from suffering, we want them to suffer. Right? So it's the opposite, can be the opposite depending on the type of anger. If we want them to suffer, that releases harmful chemicals in the body, which are said to harm our immune system. Very bad for the immune system. Very bad for the heart, leads to high blood pressure, etc. I don't need to give you all the details. It's so easy nowadays. If you got Google, benefits of compassion, that's it. List of 10, list of 8. Compassion or harm of anger, you can go both ways. Benefits of compassion, well, it reduces stress. Very important in the 21st century. It reduces stress, gives inner peace, gives self-confidence, gives calm. Okay? But please don't expect, I was compassionate for 2 minutes today and I don't feel better. Really, how long were we compassionate for? Of course, you know, I sniffed the organic food, I'm not feeling better. I mean, that won't help. I had a good sniff where I had a spoon of organic food. doesn't really help. That's like saying that. I ate French fries the whole day. I had 1 spoon of organic food. Well, it doesn't work. Organic food is not good for me because I'm not feeling better. It's a bit like that. It's, of course, about filling the hours with more compassion. Make it last. Okay? So the longer your mind of compassion, the longer I want this person to be happy. May they be happy. Okay? The longer we can do it, the more compassionate we are. The better we feel. So there are hormones released in the, I think it's oxytocin that's released in the body. And you can read about it, dopamine and all that. So you feel good. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, oftentimes people think compassion is good for the other person. But actually we don't know when we're compassionate whether it helps the other person. But it certainly helps ourselves. Right? So even if we're totally selfish, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama would say, be wisely selfish. Right? Initially, the self-grasping mind, the self-cherishing mind that comes from the misperception of reality is very strong. It's very strong. Please do not underestimate it. Do not suppress it. You're in trouble. So initially, we need to work with it, and slowly we can reduce it. So the way to be compassionate, even though there's self-grasping, is actually giving more happiness to the self-grasping mind, but at the same time is reducing it. Yeah? So a lot of people feel confused because there's so much emphasis on, oh, you feel better, you feel happier. And so people say, well, aren't you actually giving into the self-centered attitude, feeding into it, promising it happiness? Yes, you do initially, because the self-grasping mind is strong. It's like a hungry lion. If you ignore the hungry lion, it's going to bite you. Or in other words, I call it the rubber band effect. You stretch your rubber band too long this way, it goes woo, the other way, very strongly. So initially, we need to be careful. Work with the self-grasping mind. It is there. We're familiar with it. So it arises. So actually what happens is it arises again and again. Any habit, a habit is such that it arises again and again. It arises frequently with a certain strength and with a certain frequency. So we cannot suppress it. We cannot wish it away. And therefore, when we practice the Dharma, we are slowly forming a new habit of like compassion and so forth. That weakens the other one a little bit. Yeah? But without ignoring it. So we feel better. So the self-grasping mind goes, yeah, go ahead. Okay? Self-grasping mind is just a type of awareness, and it tells us, go ahead. Okay? So this is all about, this is helping us to understand better our own psyche, which takes me to the next type of dependent origination, or dependent arising. So we had dependent arising from the point of view of causes and conditions. We are the result of many causes and conditions. So there is no self that has accomplished this, or that is totally independently guilty of such and such. So we are basically the result of causes and conditions, and so are other people. And we need to forgive ourselves in the same way as we forgive others, because there are all these causes and conditions, and our input is just one part of it. But then to talk of dependence on parts. Before we finish, we have about 15 more minutes, and I want to take some questions then. But basically, who are we? Not just from the point of view of the causes and conditions that gave rise to us, but as a person, right now. And again, there's so much misunderstanding, not really understanding that I'm not my body, and I'm not my mind. So in the West, in Western countries, and I include Singapore to be a Western, maybe not geographically, but it's a Western country. Western habits, Maybe, of course, not all the way same as in Europe and as in America, but quite similar. Body obsession. Unbelievable. The obsession with the body. Really strong. Right? Very strong. I mean, Barbie would never survive. I've been told. Barbie would not survive. Right? And those are the ideals, Barbies. I grew up on Barbies. And then the models, the pictures on the streets. I mean, come on. Actually, modern advertising, I have great respect for it. Because it is very sophisticated. It's very intelligent. But we need to learn to understand it. To not be carried away by it. I mean, for me, it was very interesting to hear that those models on those billboards, they're to some degree so photoshopped that they could not survive if they really looked like that. So you they once showed this in a documentary that I watched. They showed this very beautiful Brazilian, girl, very pretty. And they showed what she really looked like. Some curves in places that you usually have curves. And then after the photograph was taken, they kind of cut them away. And then there was someone saying, well, this is potentially very dangerous if she really looked like that. She'd have a huge problem. Her hips would be too small. Would be too small. So anyway, I don't remember all the details, but it's not realistic. And we take it in subconsciously. We subconsciously take it in since we're very young. Now that's the way it is. This is the 21st century with all its advantages and disadvantages. We cannot choose and say, I just want the advantages. We'll have to accept the disadvantages. But a lot of it is just becoming aware of it. Becoming aware of it. What is my body image? And this idea, I am my body. When I talk about the I, the self, the one that does exist, is basically that it's basically made up of parts. Body and mind. So we have a body. We're not our body. Right? So in the West, of course, with young people, there's this idea, I'm not a good person because my body is, too big, too small, too square, too round, whatever. Right? Curly hair, you want straight hair you want curly hair, right? It's the whole, you're tall, you want to be small, and if you're small, you want to be tall. I always wanted to be small, right? Anyway, so, therefore, the point is, we identify too strongly with our body. Okay? I am my body. No, we have a body, and that body is aging. Let's live with it. It's not going to last. It's impermanent. It's just going to grow older. It's okay. Okay? So to let go with regard to the body. And then the mind too. I am not my afflictions. I am not my anger. If I'm not able to do something, and that's a particular type of awareness, that doesn't mean I'm a failure. Okay? So again, to look at our own mind and to see there's certain awarenesses that we identify with. Especially when we're Dharma practitioners. We want to be so not angry. And then we're so angry. And then we're like, oh, I'm so angry. I'm such an angry person. Right? And more than that. In certain moments I have anger. But in other moments I don't. Okay? So with regard to arrogance, again, the old picture. Not only do I ignore causes and conditions that gave rise to my achievement, but also I focus on just one quality. One quality. And I forget my negative qualities in those moments of arrogance. And you may think, oh, I'm not an arrogant person. I think I'm not an arrogant person. But every now and then I catch myself to look down on others and think, I know better. Right? A sense of entitlement. Oftentimes, when like in Germany, there are a lot of immigrants now coming, and sometimes they don't know how to do things, and there I am, I can do it because I could do it. And I can catch myself this moment of, there you go. There I got this moment. I'm looking down on someone else because they don't know. Right? So in a country like Singapore, where we have different immigrants, of course, with better skills, lesser skills, let's watch our mind. I don't think there's anyone here who's always like, whoa. I don't think you would come to a Dharma center if you were like, I'm already perfect. What do I, right? Why would you come? But still, I think we have our moments, right? And this is to watch out for, where we think, I just know a little bit better. I'm a little bit better, right? And to watch out, to recognize those. Okay? And again, yeah, but I also have a little bit lacking in another department. Or if I feel really low about myself, I lack self-confidence. Okay, I cannot do this, but I can do that. I'm very good at that. And to also get a more balanced picture of who we are. Right? If you don't feel good about yourself, this is the time to check. Come on, I mean, you see, it's so interesting, like, there's so many different states of mind. Depression is a big one. Fear. Fear and depression are really big. They're big emotions in the 21st century. So depression, we already kind of addressed it, and I really thought about this a lot. With another person, it's harder, but with ourselves, it's good to look. What am I really depressed about? What could if I could make some magical change, what would it be? Because we instinctively know, right? And then if we find, oh, because I can't do that, our mind is zooming in on just one thing, zooming in and exaggerating it. And suddenly I'm just that failure. That's totally in the imagination. So this one situation that's already passed, the moment the failure took place, it's already changing. Okay? So it's there and then things change already. So let go. Okay, I was not able to do this. I can learn from my mistakes. There's other things I can do. So this is really see yourself as having parts of being very complex. I hate it when people say, this child is stupid. There is no stupid child. What does stupid mean, actually? Stupid means I am not good at math. Okay, I'm stupid in that department, but I can make really good chicken rice. Vegetarian chicken rice. I love that you call the vegetarian chicken rice. So I'm very good at chicken rice, the vegetarian one. So I'm not stupid. I'm maybe not good at math. I may be stupid in math, but I'm good at cooking. That needs a certain intelligence. And I'm very good at fixing watches. But other things I don't know. You see, so we all have talents. So we say stupid in relation to such and such, I can't do that, but in relation to so and so, I can. We're very complex. So please remember dependence on parts when you feel low about yourself. Look what's really going on. And so sometimes we dwell in this, I'm just so horrible, right? And it's almost get attached to being such a failure. This is how our mind works, really interesting. But then to just shake it off, come on, I mean, what's the point? I'm not helping myself or anyone else. And to be compassionate, I need to start here. I need to start here. See my good qualities. See that I deserve happiness. Be patient with my own qualities. Then I can be patient with others. Then I can see their good qualities. Right? And the 21st century, yes, of course, is in order to improve. They tell us, look, there's room for improvement. That's fine. Right? I mean, they tell us this is a fault, etc. But there is room for improvement. There are good qualities, and we can grow. Now, this is practical in everyday life. Right? Dependent arising is not just a concept that is there to mess us up, basically. No, it's there because our life becomes easier when we understand we are the result of causes and conditions, and we are the result of different parts. Physical, and more importantly, mental. Okay? So that's the second level of dependent arising. Does that make sense? This is not even the deepest level. I'm still with the kind of coarser levels, but you can see your life can actually change. You can do something about your problems if you really take it here, and then not just the upper kind of the coarse intellectual, but take it to a more emotional state. And so now, when you have a problem, when you have an issue, you go, which of those dependent arisings could help me? This is why Lama Yeshe says, you become your own therapist. It's much cheaper. You save some money. You don't have to go anywhere. You just sit down where you are. Maybe just go to the toilet. That's where you're alone. You can reflect. Go to the bathroom and just go, which one of those could maybe solve this problem? Causes and conditions? Or parts? Who I am. I'm not defined by any of those parts. I'm basically, I call the I such. Okay, but now, just before we finish, to start with something a little exciting and then I'll let you go. You know, like these serials, like something exciting and then you want to go and watch it again tomorrow. The last one is dependence on labeling. Now that's really difficult. But I want to give you your homework first. It's a difficult one. It doesn't completely relate to this in the same way as we did yesterday, dependent arising, but I just want you to do it anyway. As your homework, when you go home, okay, you have a problem if you're never envious. Then this homework will be a little difficult. I actually met people who said they're never envious. But even if you're not, tomorrow to make a conscious effort that whenever you meet someone or you're in their vicinity, you rejoice in their success. You take a moment and you really make your mind just rejoice in their success. Whoever you see, if you see anyone, we don't know about their success, but just take a moment and rejoice. Spend the whole day, think of someone you know is maybe you start with His Holiness Dalai Lama. Very hard to be jealous of His Holiness. Right? Very jealous if you take your Lama, your own personal teacher, very difficult, right? I don't think there's anyone who's in competition with His Holiness. That'd be really stupid on top of it. If you ever become an equal and you're competitive, you wouldn't have jealousy. So I think His Holiness is pretty safe about kind of jealousy, or people are really not really getting who His Holiness is. So take His Holiness first and be so happy. Just use His Holiness first, right? And then you create this happiness. He's so wonderful. All this virtue He creates, it's so much happiness He gives to others. And then you focus on someone you don't like, and you focus on any virtuous quality that they have. The fact that they were maybe kind to someone, or that they're successful. Having success, so of course it's sad that they harm others, but it's more complex. It's not just that they harm others, they also have success. And they may even help some people. They may be generous, offer their money to some people. They're kind to their family. They may not be kind to you as an employee, but as a parent, they may be very kind to their children, or they may, cuddle their dogs, give their dog happiness. That is also giving a living being happiness. So we can't know, but just anything good that happens to anyone we don't like, if we are lucky, envious of, jealousy is a good one, that's really effective. Just think, I'm really happy. So allow this happiness you experienced previously with His Holiness to go to this person. And just try it. Okay? It's not easy, but it just gives you more joy. Right? We can only have the success of one person. If we can be happy for other people, we have just more joy. Right? I mean, as it says, life sucks and then you die. But, we can have some happiness in between, being happy for our own success. And then, how many Singaporeans? 5 million? Wow, there's a lot of joy. The street workers, how hard they work with their long sleeves in that sun. I rejoice whatever virtue they accumulate by doing this work, by allowing others, I rejoice in them. Right? The Prime Minister and the President, I mean, they're tough jobs. Maybe they have a great swimming pool, but who knows how often they can use it, right? I mean, great responsibility, great worry. And so I rejoice in what they do for others. And especially those we're jealous of. Let's really try and make it a day of rejoicing. Okay? So that's your homework. Of course, it's up to you to do it, but just try it out. Okay. But then, so this is the homework for tomorrow. And then going back to the hardest, the most difficult one. Okay. To ourself, the I, being merely labeled. The I said the I exists because we label, we use the word I. When the hand writes, we label I write. When the mind thinks, when the mind analyzes, I label I analyze. But actually, like I said initially, there is no, and we need to go more into detail on this, and so please don't worry, this is very difficult. I'm just going to mention it a little bit and go more into details on that. But basically, when we think when we say I, it's actually the summary of the thought I. It's a mosaic, you know the word mosaic? So who am I? It's the summary of all the thoughts. I am like this. I am like that. I am like this. Right? And so I'm not saying we're making something up. I say I'm a woman. Okay? Is there some womanness to be found? Something that makes me a woman? No. It's independence on a certain body shape that I say woman. In relation to something other than myself, that is body, I say I'm a woman. Then I say I'm a daughter. Well, in relation to another person who says she's my mom, which I believe, in relation to her and in relation to my dad, I say I'm a daughter. So I have a sense I'm a daughter, I'm a woman, I'm German in relation to a little maroon passport, right? Which they made maroon because this is the right color. No, I'm kidding. It used to be green. Now it's maroon. Actually quite nice. So anyway, in relation to a particular passport, I become German. Is there something intrinsic German within me? No, it's only in relation to a passport. Therefore, I say I'm German, right? And so that is part of the mosaic of who I am. I'm German, okay? And I'm this. And then you tell me something, and then I add that. You know, if you tell me you're selfish, if I believe that, I go, okay, I'm selfish, okay? I may just go, no, I'm just wonderful. And then, of course, right? I'm wonderful, that's the thought. No. But honestly, if we, our input with other people, okay? You're like this, you're like that. And actually, language forms who we are. And so this is very interesting. Language forms reality. And when I say language are just the symbols. I'm actually getting a quote here for you. Language, it's very interesting. So language are just the symbols. Of course, it's the thought. It's like this, it's like that. And modern science is now catching up with Buddhism. Very interesting. Where previously it was believed that there is this objective world and we're just giving it different names. We give different names to things. But now it's seen that it's the other way around. That this world we live in is the result of our language or our thoughts. Our reality, okay, I'll read you something. I just Googled it today. I couldn't find the one that I learned about before, but there's this website. It's called Psychology Today. And they have also, I believe they have a magazine out. Anyway, it says here, there's a famous, most influential American linguist, Edward Sapir. The worlds in which different societies live are distinct worlds. Not merely the same worlds with different labels attached. And this is most important now. For centuries, okay, I better say it because I think to translate is hard. for centuries, people have thought, I'm just explaining it, that words were just labels for objects. And that different languages just attached different sounds, different strings of sounds to things, or different concepts. So the things were already there, and just different concepts were applied. Now it is suggested, now people come to understand that the world is perceived differently by people speaking different languages. So it's not that we all perceive the same, but we use different words to describe it, but it's the language we speak that forms the world we live in. Or more radically, that people could only perceive aspects of the world for which their languages have words. That you can only perceive the things that you have a word for, a concept for. And Buddhists go even further. They say that's the only reason things exist, because they're concepts. Now this is really radical. But if you do a little bit of research on this, here is really where Buddhism and modern linguistics come closer. And I give you a funny example that I also read about. I just in this, and it gives you a sense of it. It doesn't go all the way yet, but it's kind of entertaining. There is an Aboriginal group called the Kuuk-Tayore. Kuuk-Tayore. I don't even know I'd say it correctly. So they think slightly differently in terms of, we say up, down, left, right. That's about it. They use the cardinal directions, right? East, west, south, southwest, southeast, and so forth. And so they would not say there's an ant on your leg. They say there's an ant on your southeast leg. So they're always in touch with the cardinal directions. And so here it says, it's very funny. The normal greeting in Kuuk-Tayore is, where are you going? Tibetans are the same. The Tibetans never say, how are you? Well, they do now, but traditionally they say, where are you going? And the answer should be something like, south, southeast, in the middle distance. So if you don't know which way you're facing, you can't even get past hello. So you basically, if you tell someone, if you meet someone on the street in Singapore and you say, where are you going? You have to know where are you going? Is it a middle distance or long distance, right? Is the southeast? So very much their language reflects their ability of knowing. So therefore scientists have found they have incredible abilities in terms of directions. They're very good with directions because it's always part of their thoughts. It's part of their thought process, and it has made it into their language. And so we laugh about it, but there's so much about it. There's another research I read about, and I didn't have the time to prepare it, but that actually in Mandarin and in English, you have a different perception of time. Now, correct me whether we're wrong, but when you think of the future, it's vertical. It's up. So it's like the month up versus the month down. Whereas in English, you say the month ahead and the month behind. So time, our perception of time is like the month ahead or the month behind. It's kind of like a directional, right? What's the words? Horizontally. Versus in Mandarin, it's the month ahead and the month up and month down. That's a different way of thinking of time. So you probably have, and they also say in the different cultures, if you think of time, if you're supposed to think of one event starting and it ending, in the Western world, you start from left to right. In the Arabic world, it's from right to left. In the Aboriginal world, it's from east to west. Something starts where the sun rises, and it ends where the sun sets. And then you have all the other complications. So we think differently because we use different language. And Buddhists say, well, We exist because things exist because we label. Now, this is really, really difficult. This is the subtlest level of dependent origination. But just to throw some ideas in the room, we are a mosaic. Our sense of self, our sense of identity is basically a mosaic of different thoughts. I am like this. So this is your sense of self. Okay? In relation, of course, we're not randomly. I'm not calling myself a man today and a woman tomorrow. No. Independence on a basis of imputation, a certain body. I say I'm a woman. Okay? In relation to a certain mind that arises now and then, I say I'm intelligent or I'm unable to make good decisions, etc. So I label. And I am, as a person, the result of all these different thoughts I have. And so language, basically our concepts of the world, create our reality. Right? Which accords for very different greetings in this world and different responses in terms of south, 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 east, middle distance versus going to the market. Right? Okay. On that note, it's 9:10. As I announced yesterday, I take the liberty to I go to 9:30. I know you're tired. I know you had a long day. I've also suggested it's not disrespectful. You need to go home. You need to look after your family. Please, you can get up any time, of course. I would not at all think in any way that to be disrespectful. But I would like to take a few moments now to answer questions, if you have any. If there are any questions? Yes, please. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
So yesterday we talked about the dependent arising of phenomena such as a table. Mm-hmm. Today we talked about the dependent arising of self. Such as self-grasping arrogance. Mm-hmm. My question is, which one is easier to have a direct realization of? Mm-hmm. And does someone who is liberated realizes one type of dependent arising and then have to realize the other one, or is it the same?
Okay. So his question, he has already background in Buddhism, obviously. So his question is very specific. He right away goes into, well, we need to understand those things. Right now, I just talk about them. So I talk about the dependent nature of the I, an understanding of which helps me to understand that the I doesn't exist as solidly, as independently as it appears to me to exist, which in itself is not a problem if I didn't have attachment to the self and didn't feel I was more important than everyone else. This is where the problem starts. I mentioned that yesterday briefly. So therefore, we need to understand, in order to let go of this self-centeredness and that obsession with I'm more important than others, by understanding how the self really exists. So we need to have an understanding of that, and not just an intellectual understanding, but eventually a direct experience of that. But also for other things, not just the self, for everything, also this table. That doesn't exist as concretely, as solidly, and we haven't gone into the table as much because the self is more important. But we need to also understand that an object such as this table is by no means as solid as it seems. Okay, so his question was, which one is easier to understand of those two? Is it easier to understand that the person doesn't exist as an intrinsic, independent phenomenon versus understanding the table does not? And when I experience it directly, which one comes first? Yeah, which one's easier and which one comes first? There is some disagreement on that. But the way I've learned it from my teachers, it depends on you. It depends on you. For some, it's easier. The self is easier. For others, the table is easier. I guess it's with everything. You know, for some people, it's easier to put their right foot behind their head as part of yoga, and for the next person it's easier to put their leg up the wall, stand there in a split. I mean, everyone's mind is slightly different. And so usually they say, basically, I mean, the way I've learned it, it just depends on the person. But because we're not table-centered, but self-centered, right? We're not table-obsessed, we're self-obsessed. It's a good idea to start with the good old self. Yeah, it's recommended, okay? Seen as very important. Now, in answer to your question, when you directly experience it, actually when you directly experience the actual mode of this table, you will automatically know the actual mode of everything. You will not, it's not like each one you have to go through. Tick, that one's gone, this one's gone, right? Intellectual, conceptual understanding, you start with one thing and you work your way through. But when you directly experience it, right? It's a bit like you can think of a taste of a dish. What is a complicated dish in Singapore? Give me the name of a complicated, with lots of different flavors and different things coming together.
Curry?
Oh, everyone, pardon? Curry? Laksa. I like the word laksa, so I'm going to use laksa. Curry, I know that word. Laksa. So laksa, if you think about it, you take each different separate taste, right? Kind of like intellectually, conceptually. You can't think of all of them. You just take each taste to mind. But when you experience it directly, it's just all of them together, right? So maybe that's the closest example of laksa, whatever that actually means. Now I'm curious. So therefore it's like intellectually versus direct experience. So direct experience is all the flavors together. Yeah. Okay, great. More questions maybe upstairs? Yeah, go ahead first. And then we'll also have everyone upstairs.
Okay. Thank you, Kishma, for the talk today. Just wondering about the concept of relativity. So like long and short, where does it fall under in the three categories? Is it number 2 or number 3?
Nice question. Nice question. Okay. The question is the concept of relativity. Concept of relativity. Okay. To give an example, in relation to this pen, in relation to this, no, let's put this one. In relation to this, the band of this watch, this pen is long, versus in relation to this tissue box. Why is this here? Yesterday it was almost into, now I've got it. So in relation to this tissue box, right, this is short, right, and this is long. So in relation to something longer, this is short. In relation to something shorter, it is long. Where does that fit in? Good question. Okay, I don't like to answer it right away because it is a good question and I want you guys to figure it out. I'll give you a few hints. Okay. So just taking long versus short. Long versus short. Right? That's saying that. And saying, I call this long in relation to something shorter. And I call this short in relation to something longer. Okay, so the second one is kind of easier to place, right? I call it such and such in relation. So what does that mean? Which type of dependence? I say it is long, so I call it something long in relation to something shorter. So there's the third type is already described. But just long and short. Long and short. If you say long and short, here and there, big and small, okay? So you have these opposing things which are obviously dependent on each other. Which category would you put it in? It's not that obvious. But is it causes and conditions? Is it parts? Second? Parts, yes. It is actually described, according to my understanding, it is described as part of parts. Okay? It's described as the category of parts, where it's a little bit hard, but basically we say in relation to the surface and the legs, this is a table. It has parts. It has, in relation to something, it exists. It exists in relation to something other than itself. So this pen, as a long pen, exists in relation to something shorter. It's not a part of it, but it's just saying that the shorter thing is not its cause. It's not its cause. It doesn't have to precede it and give rise to it. Plus, we're not talking of labeling yet. Leaving aside labeling, which takes it to a deeper level, I'm just saying it depends on something simultaneous, which is not a part of it as such, but it still depends on something small to be big and on something big to be small. So you could kind of categorize it into, it's a little harder, that one. But that is very helpful. It's actually a helpful idea where the relativity is much more obvious. But everything is relative to something else. And therefore, like I said, I'm a daughter relative to my parents. I'm a human relative to my human body. I'm a living being relative to my mind. Yeah, so it's not like an opposite phenomenon in relation to which I exist. I'm also Kelsang Wangmo in relation to everything non-Kelsang Wangmo. Right? That's a little bit abstract. It's a little bit weird. But if I take the opposite, long and short, and I say, this is long in dependence on the opposite, which is short, I can also say, this is a pen in relation to the opposite non-pen. So I could say that. Without saying I just call it such, but just in everyday life, without talking about labeling it or designating it, not even going just of what we usually accept to exist, it makes sense. It is a pen in relation to everything that is a non-pen. Okay? So, therefore, it's long in relation to something shorter. It is useful in relation to the fact that I can write with it. So everything is relative, but the relativity is a little harder when it comes to... It's a little easier, let's put it that way. It's a little easier with long, short, here, there. Yeah? I, other. Very important, very easy actually. I. It feels like I am really I, and you're really other, and I'm really more important. Totally ignoring that from your perspective, I'm other. I never think of myself as other. Right? Yeah? Okay. Great. So it's a good question. Oh, please, yes, upstairs. Sure.
We have a question upstairs.
Do we have a question?
Hi,
Yes, we
Geshe-ma.
have.
Yeah.
I have a question on compassion, which I feel you might have addressed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still like to seek more clarity. So my question is with regards to altruism and compassion.
Yes.
I understand that there are two different notions, but we speak much about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, what does it mean to truly be altruistically compassionate?
Okay, let me make sure I understand the question correctly. So did you say there are two notions of compassion? No. So,
One notion of altruism and one notion of
one notion of altruism and one notion of compassion. So in other words, what's the difference between the two? That's a good question. What's the difference? The word altruism is used to describe a certain mental state, but I'm not sure is the correct translation. I mean, I'm not sure because it's sometimes used and sometimes not. But my understanding of compassion is the wish for someone to be free from suffering, the wish that someone be free, be protected, be free from suffering, And altruism is, so this is referring to this way in which this particular word is used, the altruistic attitude. I myself will do something. I myself. So compassion is the motivating force. First, we want them to be free from suffering. And thereafter, it's not like, okay, may they be free, someone else should come and do it, I'm busy. Right? It should really be the next step should then be, okay, I'll do something. I have to do something. Yeah? I myself will do something. So altruism is actually a step further. But compassion, the question that now arises, why is compassion such a big deal? And why not taking this altruism as making more of it? That's actually an interesting question. And in answer to that, we have these different emotional states that are described. Love, right? Wishing, for all sentient beings to be happy. Great love. Great compassion, wishing for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. And then the special attitude or the special altruistic attitude, I myself will bring this about. Yeah. And why there's so much emphasis on compassion? And of course, what comes afterwards is bodhicitta, the wish for me to bring happiness to all sentient beings by way of becoming a Buddha. That's the means to accomplishing my altruistic wish. Why is compassion the one that I use more? And why is this altruism not used? Because it's actually when you really get up and you do something. And one of the answers I received, and I think it makes sense, but it should be debated, should still keep the question open. And this was not your question, I'm aware of that, but it's just always something that's lingered in the back of my mind. Why, if altruism is so much stronger, put emphasis on compassion? And the answer I received to this question was that usually we're like, my suffering, my suffering, my suffering. It's always this direction. My suffering, my happiness. My suffering, my happiness. When you develop compassion for others, in particular for all sentient beings, for the first time, you're moving away from the I. You're actually going this way. So it's like a huge change of direction. Okay, and again, direction, of course, it's like, basically, it's just a word, saying like, instead of I, it's others. I mean, all the time I'm like, I want to be happy, my suffering, I'm just concerned about that. And now suddenly, my main concern is others. Since that's the first step, there's so much emphasis on it. And as one of my teachers, Geshe Kelsang would say, with that, you enter the highway. To get there is like a very bumpy road, right? And then once you have great compassion, you have bodhicitta, you've entered the highway. Then things are easier. Right? Okay, sorry, this was a little bit more than what you asked for. But this was also something that I've been thinking about, so I just added that. But yes, so hopefully it became clear.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Oh, yes, please, go ahead, sure.
Any questions?
Anyone next door, maybe, in this building?
Okay. No questions.
No question, okay, all right.
Any questions from here? Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. My second question is, yesterday you mentioned about exaggeration and even today as well. I'm just wondering, how do we draw a line between reality and exaggeration? For example,
reality and exaggeration.
Yeah.
How do we draw a line?
Right, because
For example,
you mentioned that many a times we add on things, yeah, and that is the exaggeration. So, for example, if you think of a good quality of someone,
yes.
so that person really have a good quality, but we tend to exaggerate. So how do we draw the line? Same with bad qualities. Yeah, we see bad quality in someone.
Yes.
And then automatically, I think we exaggerate it. But how do we draw the line? What is reality and what is exaggeration?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. When I say we exaggerate, that's like you could be on the debate ground. Because it's actually a debate. Usually we debate, we define anger. To define anger, we say anger is an emotion that feels resentment or aversion towards the other person or feels a dislike of the other person by way of exaggerating their negativity. And then the question is, what is the right measure of the negativity? That's a very, very, very popular debate question. What is the right measure? When you say exaggerate, in relation to what? Good question. Good question. It's a debate question, actually, right? In relation to what? What does it mean? Here we need to actually check, what does it mean to exaggerate? In what way do we exaggerate? Right? There are many different ways in which we can exaggerate. What do you think? I throw it back at you. What do you think? Where do we start to exaggerate? I'll give you some hint. Where do we start to exaggerate? Where does it all start? Where do we start adding? Remember yesterday I spoke about this chain, how we get from A to MNLOP afflictions. These steps in between. No, they're not that many in between. They're not usually described. Remember I talked about misperception of reality, leading to the exaggeration of something positive and negative, and then leading to attachment and anger. This needs to be explained in more detail. It's much more complicated than that. But first, there's the root ignorance, then there's an exaggeration, and then there is anger, attachment, and so forth. Okay, this is really difficult, and I'm glad you bring it up because more explanation needs to be given. Where do we start exaggerating?
If I start to experience a feeling and my thought process is changing and I keep more time thinking about it, and the mind is going to
gets more and more obsessed about it.
Yeah, the more we start to think about it, is the starting point of...
That is definitely becoming more and more obsessed about it, but that is more about the mind versus the object, exaggerating the negativity of the object. So the mind becomes more obsessive, as in like can't let go, can't think of something else. But her question was more with regard to the object. How negative is negative? Where am I exaggerating? Where am I adding something that is not there? Come on, when am I adding?
When the object is no longer there, but you're still thinking about it?
No, not when the object is no longer there and you're still thinking about it. When do I start in the whole thought process? When I get from A to afflictions, from somewhere to afflictions, where do I start adding? When is the first moment I add something to things that they don't actually have?
Very first moment.
Very first moment of what?
Of contact.
What is the actual root of everything? Ignorance. That's when I exaggerate that phenomena exist intrinsically, independently, which they don't. I add a quality onto phenomena. I perceive phenomena to exist in and of themselves, not just labeling positive, negative in relation to something else. Okay? I give you a very good example. I give you something that makes you laugh. You know, we use the word positive, negative. Okay, good or bad. One time I had to translate for Geshe Kelsang. And without any warning, he said, and he just said something I was supposed to translate, the Buddha is bad. I said, can you say that again? He said, the Buddha is bad. I was like, what? Did he just say? He said, the Buddha is bad. I cannot translate that. How am I going to translate? And so he was like, translate. I was like, okay. I said, the Buddha is bad. Anger is good. I was like, okay. By that time, I was like, I gave up. Okay, anger is good. Love is bad. And he kept doing this. And sometime I was like, never mind. And then he said, the Buddha is bad because he's harmful. He is harmful because he harms the afflictions. Anger is good because it benefits our suffering. Right? So here it's saying that there is no intrinsic good, there is no intrinsic bad. It is in relation. If it harms something, we call it good. And if it harms that which we desire, which is happiness, we say the Buddha is good. Let's say this whole world were topsy-turvy. Hypothetically, we would all like to suffer. We love suffering. Oh, suffering of suffering, my favorite. Second favorite, suffering of change. Right? Let's just take that. Then anger would be that the Buddha would be teaching anger is good for you. Jealousy is good for you. Because it gives us what we want, suffering. The more war, the better. The more murder, the more bloodshed, the better. It sounds bizarre, right? But if I liked suffering, I would love murder and so forth. So, I mean, then that's when you could actually now use the word exactly the way Geshe-la did. The Buddha, if the Buddha taught about happiness, the Buddha would be bad. The message of the Buddha would be bad, and anger would be good for us. So in this little exercise, he was basically telling us there's nothing in and of itself good or bad. It is just relative to how it harms. So in a conventional world, we do say there's something good or bad. It's conventional. As in like in relation to something other than that, we call it good. But there's no inherent, because otherwise everyone would have to perceive it as good. If it was really intrinsically good to eat lasang, if that was inherently delicious, there would be lasang in every country, and I definitely would be able to say it properly. Because I would have grown up with it, because I knew it. It would be an inherent delicious dish. So here we start exaggerating when we see this person as in and of himself as bad. That is already the first level of exaggeration. And then, because we're attached, then these other emotions, they're already there. The attachment to the inherent I, that is inherent more precious, then in relation to that, it becomes even more negative. It becomes worse and worse. But so the exaggeration takes place the moment you start to perceive it as intrinsically. You're already exaggerating it. And it goes from there. And there it just goes stronger. So you want it to the right measure, right? Conventionally. Merely labeled in relation to harming something. Harming that which we like, which is happiness. So bad. Does that make sense? Does that answer that? Okay, I think I'm really stretching it if I go on. Because we still have to do the prayer. So please hold your questions upstairs and anywhere you're sitting. And then let's do the prayers. Let's take a moment to come down and generate compassion, altruism. So I myself will dedicate this virtue I've accumulated to make a difference in this world, to make a difference to my own mind, and may this become a cause for me to become awakened and have the ability, therefore, to take others to that same state. Okay. So with this in mind, so now if you could